All right. Well, boy, do I have a collection of literacy experts here this morning. They're all co-authors of a book. Robb is the main author, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But we have Laura Robb, um, David Harrison, and Tim Rasisnki. Holy cow! Wow. So in just a minute, I'm going to ask them each to tell about themselves. But let's see if I can get this technology doing things. And I want to share for just a moment. And what we're going to be talking about, folks, is their new book. It's not out yet, but it's about to be. And we'll talk about release dates and all that. And by the time you see this blog, you'll be able to order it. Promote reading gains with differentiated instruction. And it's really quite the collection of things for teachers to use. And they've just, well, I'm going to let them tell you about how they've designed it so that teachers are going to be able to use it very well. And it's time for Sam to shut up. And we're just going to first start with a little round robin. We'll start with Laura and then David and then Tim, telling them just a bit about their background. And then Laura's going to come back and give us an overview of the book. Okay, so Laura, it's all you.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here with you and with my co-authors, Tim and David, because I think the book was definitely a collaboration, a collaborative effort, and we all supported each other. As far as what my career in literacy is, I have been a classroom teacher for more than 45 years and a coach for many, many years. I'm still coaching, and last year I was coaching a 7th grade English teacher who was my student many years ago. She asked me to coach her, and I will be doing that again this year. So it's been a wonderful and joyful career working with teachers, working with students. I've published more than 35 books about reading and writing for elementary and middle school. And I still continue to work with schools virtually.
Okay, and now next will be David Harrison, who I just have to give a thank you to David. He has been so supportive of my little project with the Missouri Reader over the years, and poetry things and all kinds of things. And so, and David is now our poet laureate. Do I have that right? Well, he'll tell you in a moment. So let's turn it over to David.
Thank you, Sam. And Tim and Laura, thank you for a wonderful experience. I always love it when I have a chance to work with either of you, much less both of you. So that was my cup runneth over. Yes, I've been recently appointed by Governor Parson in the spring of Missouri as Missouri's 7th poet laureate, the first to be declared children's poet. And we're still trying to figure out if anybody else in the nation has done that. I may claim, at least at this point, I don't know of any other children's poets who have been named to a state poet laureate post. In any event, I'd be in a small group, and I'm proud to be there. Sam, I've been writing for kids since my first book came out in 1969. Number 108 is the one we're talking about right now. And I work from 6 each morning till 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Most of my books are trade books, meaning books you'll find in the library and bookstores for kids. But somewhere along the line, I became associated with wonderful people like these two and began to write as a support writer for books for educators. And it's one of the real joys of my life. And this one is certainly no exception. I'm delighted with the results and can't wait for teachers to get their hands on this book.
And I can't either. And I'm going to then turn things over to Tim. But Tim, I'm going to kind of lead you in here and say, put a little plug in for some of the work that you and David have done with besides this book, with materials where you use David's poems to help teachers teach. And I'll turn that over.
All right, thanks, Sam. Yeah, I'm always happy to plug my own stuff and David's stuff and Laura's stuff. But again, it's just delightful to be here with my colleagues and also with you, Sam. A little bit of background about myself. I just retired from Kent State University as a professor of literacy education, where I ran the reading clinic there for a number of years, working with kids who struggle. My interest is in struggling readers in particular, and particularly in the area of foundational reading, word recognition, vocabulary, reading fluency, because it seems to be the case that most children who struggle with comprehension, that's where the source of the problem is for at least many of them. You asked me to plug the book David and I developed. We actually worked with Mary Jo Fresh, and we created a book called Partner Poems, and it's a collection of poetry that he wrote. And Mary Jo and I worked on the word recognition, the phonics part of it. So it's a nice combination of what I would call art and science, the art of the poem, and combining that with the science of teaching the skills of reading. And it's the same thing with this book here. Something that I've been interested in for the last dozen or so years has been the art and science of teaching reading. We know recently that last several years how important it is to see reading as a science, but unless we acknowledge that teaching reading is also an art form, I think we may be disappointed in the results that we get. So it's just delightful to be able to, pair up with Laura and David, who I both consider instructional artists, to create this book that is coming out, aimed at differentiating instruction, so identifying the needs of children and meeting them through artistic and scientific instruction.
Okay, so I'm going to turn it back over to Laura in just a second and say, well, first of all, the conversation before the interview, Laura pointed out that she had taken what was a pretty, or you all have taken what's a pretty complex thing and turned it into something that it will be simple for teachers to use. And I am, one of my things is always, boy, my teacher followers want something they can use next Monday. Right. So, Laura, I'm going to let you do the talking now about this book. Go ahead.
Well, let me just begin by saying that teachers struggle with differentiation because it's very difficult for them to find texts to meet the wide range of students that they find in their classroom, from way below reading on a grade level to far above. So we have taken that concept, and the three of us have created a book that does just that. It lets them meet their students where they are and move them forward. So the book opens with a wonderful essay on the art and science of teaching reading, and then there are 6 introductory chapters. The first one goes over the structure of the book, so teachers understand it very carefully. And this book is dealing with instructional reading. And so it also points out where instructional reading fits in with other components of a reading curriculum, such as independent reading, the daily teacher read alouds, and writing about reading. The next chapters, we go into depth into the assessment process for this book. We talk about readers' notebooks because the students in the lessons will use readers' notebooks to record their ideas about a text. And we also have a wonderful chapter on practice and performance that Tim wrote that deals with fluency and using poetry or readers' theater, if you have readers' theater scripts, to build students' fluency in an authentic way. The word work, I want to talk a little bit about that. Every lesson has word work, and we wanted the word work to be appropriate for grades 3, 4, and 5. So we're not heading into systematic phonics. If your kids can't decode, then you need to work on that with them. But basically, what we're doing is the kids do work on word families, figurative language, synonyms and antonyms. They're dealing with connotations of words that enrich their experience with a poem. They're working on context clues to figure out the meaning of unfamiliar words. And then they work on multiple forms of a word. Every lesson, the teacher introductory lesson and the student practice lessons ends with a wonderful word ladder that Tim created that connects to the text, which makes everything so much fun. We focused on 4 high-level reading strategies: inferring, comparing and contrasting, drawing conclusions, and visualizing. And so each set of lessons and each set of texts focuses on one strategy. The beauty of the lessons is that each lesson has tips for teachers on building students' vocabulary that is necessary for the lesson. There is what we call a focus lesson, which is kind of a kissing cousin to a mini lesson, where the teacher presents a lesson using a poem or a short text written by David, and the students build their mental model of what it is to study that type of text, what it is to apply the word work that they'll be doing with their texts, and they also build a mental model of how to think deeply about a text, because we're going beyond retelling into, as you can see from the strategies we chose, high order thinking. So the lessons, after the teacher's focus lesson, we suggest a quick assessment to see if students need some support. And we have a chapter that deals with that. How do you intervene? How do you assess in a class that's dealing with all these components or elements of reading? The lesson themselves are addressed to the student. There is a poem or a short text that David wrote. And then there are questions that invite students to discuss the text with a partner, to think about vocabulary and context clues, to go into depth into the meaning of the text and how it makes them feel. And then there are questions which they answer in their notebooks. So the reason I say we've made it easy for teachers is David has created just fantastic texts for each level: students reading below grade level, near or on grade level, and above grade level. And the students work with the text. The questions, we had Shell ran them through a reading a program that said whether they were readable for kids reading at X instructional level. So all of them are readable by the student. What we're doing is building independence. We're building comprehension at a very high level. And students are being introduced to all kinds of poetry and short texts. Every student lesson ends with a word ladder, as does every focus lesson the teacher presents. The beauty of this book is if you have somebody in 5th grade that really needs to work at a 3rd grade level, we've got the texts right there. We've got the lessons right there. So the teachers can, use the lessons in ways that respond to the needs of the children in their classes. We also have a chapter on how you schedule interventions so that you're not only intervening for students who don't get it, but we're also enriching the experience for students who do get it. So that's kind of a quick overview of what our book is about.
Talk about one-stop shopping. Oh my gosh. And I have been associated with the Right to Learn conference for many, many years here in Missouri, and they deal with the secondary teachers. That's one of their main audiences, and those teachers are always asking me, what can I do with these older readers? And I guess my new advice is going to be buy this book. So I think it's brilliant. And I'll put a plug in here for the idea of using poetry as your reading, because poetry by it, well, poetry has so many wonderful things about it. David and Tim can talk about that for years. But poetry is meaning rich and short. Okay, so you've got this meaning rich and short text so that you can concentrate on the strategies that you're trying to promote. And you've kind of put this book together in a wonderful way. So I think where we are now is I'm going to give any of you that want to have any other additions to what, I think we've pretty well covered it. And man, I can't wait for my copy. But anything else you want to say? And it's open and free.
Well, shall I go next?
Oh, sure.
Okay. Joyce Hall, who was the founder of Hallmark Cards, when asked how he learned so much about what the customer needed about cards, used to say, it's the vapors of my experience. Now, I call that part of the art of teaching or learning anything, the vapors of our experience, which is what I call on in my own work when I'm tackling something like this book. The vapors of my experience have been developing for half a century, going in and out of schools, speaking at book festivals for children, and writing over 100 books for them. Some are nonfiction, some are fiction, and many of them are poetry. So when Laura started talking about writing 500-word text, she calls that short. I call that a week's hard work, but when Laura started saying, all right, we need something on visualization, and we want it for grade 3, and we want one for underachieving on the reading, not quite there yet, and one for reading at grade level, and one reading well above grade level, go. Or we need a poem for the same purpose for grade 5. So each time I went back to the well of my own experience and tried to develop something interesting that took into consideration the requirement. So the vocabulary you choose for the child reading under grade level is going to be different from that which is for the student who's reading above reading level. Same for your use of metaphors and similes, for the complexity of your sentences, your thoughts, everything about how you present it, except for one main ingredient. The interest level has to be there. A 9-year-old child is still a 9-year-old child in every other way. So you can't write up or down. You have to write to that child, but take into consideration special needs that you as the writer, me in this case, can provide. After the end of each week, I would send what I had been able to accomplish to Laura and Tim, and they would vet my work, and they would come back to me and say whether they liked it or whether they had constructive criticisms. And I would take all those into consideration and revise and revamp accordingly. So by the end of the time, before we ever share this with our editors, the poems and the text have been through a lot of thinking process. And I couldn't ask for two better people to review and comment than the two I'm working with on this book. So I was very pleased with the result. It took a while, but we think we nailed it. And we can't wait for the teachers to either agree with that or tell us what they would rather have us do next time.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you have nailed it. And Tim, I'm going to turn it over to you in a second, but with this little caveat, there will be some of my readers who will buy this book simply because of the tremendous collection of word letters that's going to be in it. Just that itself is enough to want to get the book, besides everything else. So that's just a little pat on the back for you, and that you have turned that into its own. And everybody uses them. Everybody from all sides uses those, and that's so wonderful. So that said, Tim, do you have anything more to say?
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, thanks for the shout out on the word ladders. It's sort of become my calling card now, but you actually stole my thunder a few minutes earlier.
Dear.
You talked about poetry being so meaning rich, and that is particularly true of David's poetry. More recently we've been talking about the importance of knowledge in developing comprehension. Well, you read the poetry that David wrote, and you're going to learn something even as an adult. And so it's just a great way of using these meaningfully rich poetry along with the strategies that Laura identified. It's just a terrific way of, developing comprehension with knowledge and strategies. And I think that's what the research is telling us. Throw in the word ladder and you've got almost a complete program for kids. One more thing about the poetry, though, is, as David mentioned, he wrote them at 3 different levels. And what's great about that is a kid who is struggling can read the easier one, but what's going to happen is that's going to build knowledge that's going to allow that child to move on to the next higher and even the next higher one. And we know that when we put kids into positions where they can be challenged and provide them with support, we're going to accelerate their reading development. And that's what I think this book will actually do, is not just maintain growth, but actually accelerate growth for those children we worry the most about.
Laura, any final thoughts? And I have to give all of you huge pats on the back for putting together this wonderful collection. But any final thoughts, Laura?
Yes, I had a teacher in grade 3 who I observed, because it was local, grades 4 and 5 of vet the lessons. And I got feedback from the teachers and their students, and I watched the kids just love David's poetry and short texts and get so excited. And they work in partners, and the kids, they just said, "Do you have more? Do you have more?" And there are extra poems in the chapter on practice and performance. But David is a master, as Tim says, of this. But I think that having it vetted and listening to the feedback of the teachers and the students helped me do some really revising that, again, will make everything more accessible to the teachers and the children. What is so important, and I think Tim touched on it, is that when we give children texts to read, they should be outstanding, the finest piece of literature that we can find. And David Harrison is amazing. And what I also want to say is we have lessons for grades 3, 4, and 5. But if you had special ed kids in middle school, and the lessons are not, they don't say for grade 3, grade 4, that's in a grid. That's another great thing, a grid that comes before the lessons. The kids never see that it's below art. They just know that it's different texts and they're sharing and learning. but I think it would work for kids in middle school who were reading. There are kids in middle school. I work a lot in middle school. There are 8th graders reading on a 3rd or 4th grade level. The beauty of David's poems are that they're not babyish. They appeal to those grade levels, but boy, they appeal to me as an adult and to Tim, I know, because we would give him that kind of feedback. To have that kind of material at your fingertips as a teacher and as a learner, to me, is the best. So,
Wow.
All right. Well, not only are you all giving us something that my teachers can use next Monday, I have an idea of something they can use next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and maybe for the whole year. This is just an amazing thing. So there's one last thing on a Bomarito interview, and all of you have done one with me before, and you know what that is. And that is that everybody smiles and gives us a Zoom wave goodbye. And thank you so much. I totally appreciate it. Goodbye.
thank you. Thank you. Have
Thanks,
a good
Sam.
day.